Traders Corner is brought to you by IG.
Good evening, welcome to Traders Corner. As always, I'm joined by Garth McKenzie, founder and editor of Traders Corner. Garth, welcome.
Hi, Julieta.
Garth, we're going to start off the show tonight on a profit that you have made out of your trade in Zeder. And I guess there's also an aspect to consider when you trade a share, and that's boredom. And I think you've got bored with this one and you decided to cut out.
Yeah, I have got a little bit bored with it. It has worked for us, though, it has to be said, and we've managed to catch a nice move. I think we've caught the rump of most of the move in the Zeder share price. If you have a look at it, it's on the screen at the moment, and we've shown this chart a number of times over recent weeks. Basically, what I've put on there are the different inflection points. You've got 7 Rand at the bottom, then 8 Rand in the middle, and then 9 Rand. And you can see how each of those areas have come into play on a number of occasions. So we had support at 7 Rand on quite a few occasions this year, resistance at 8 Rand, which then became support in the middle of the year. And then up at 9 Rand, we've also had a number of inflection points around that area. Now the price got down towards 7 Rand in late September, and we decided then to go long of 13,000 CFDs at 7 Rand 35 per share. The stop loss was 6.95, and I said that I'm looking for a move up towards 8 Rand to 8 Rand 50. Now we've got the move to 8 Rand. It's gone a little bit above 8 Rand, and it seems to be stalling around about that sort of area now. And yes, it might still go higher. It's very possible that it will. But you know, we've held on to this trade now for about 5 weeks, and I think, you know, we also do need to try and keep the content on the show fresh, and we need to try and keep things moving, and we need a bit of momentum. And I really have struggled with that over the last 2 months in terms of keeping the show going, keeping the profit ticker moving over. And sometimes you do need to just, you know, say, all right, we've done okay, we've made some money here. Let's take the money off the table. I mean, there is still a possibility that this thing is busy forming the right shoulder of a head and shoulders pattern here. Time will tell, I suppose. But I think we've made some money. So I decided that let's get out. I sold it at 8 Rand the other day, which is at the beginning of our sort of target zone, if you like. And that locks us in a profit of 6,630 Rand after taking into account costs. So that's brokerage costs and then the time value of holding a CFD for the last 5 weeks.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, that's also something to consider if you use CFDs to trade with, that the longer that you hold a position, the more it actually ends up costing you.
Yes, that's right. You are paying interest on your CFD positions on a daily basis. And your interest rate on CFDs now runs at somewhere around about 8.5% per annum, and that cost is calculated daily on the notional value of your exposure. So, you know, it does tend to add up over time. And what I find with my style of trading is generally I like to hold a trade for a couple of days to a couple of weeks. And generally when you do that, your financing costs don't become too much of an issue. But when you start holding these trades for an extended period of time, the interest costs do add up. And then you need your share price to really be moving nicely in your favor in order to compensate for that. Okay. So basically looking at this, I figured we've made decent money out of it. And also, like you said, I am actually a little bit bored of it. So let's take the money and move on and find something else to do.
And free up the capital to do something else. Okay, so, and it's, you know, 6,600 Rand, not necessarily to be sneezed at. Garth, then talking about something else, you're looking at Redefine Properties. You've looked at this one before, and it wasn't particularly successful, I have to say, but you're going back to mama. Why?
Yeah, we did trade this stock earlier in the year. I think it was in around about March or April of this year, and we were unsuccessful that time, and we got stopped out, and we lost a little bit of money. I'm looking at Redefine now, and I do quite like the setup, although, you know, leading on from a boring trade in Zeder, I'm not sure we're going to be thrilled by excitement with Redefine either. But it is interesting in terms of the timing of the year, and also from a technical standpoint, it does look kind of interesting where it is at the moment. So the chart of Redefine is up on the screen at the moment. What's evident there is that we've got this bottom upward trend that comes in. It comes in around about 11 Rand 50, that sort of area, and the share has traded close to that area now. And then we've got this overhead resistance, which comes in at about 11 Rand 90. So you could almost argue that this might be making an ascending triangle type of pattern. Anyway, there's support down here at the bottom end of this uptrend, and then there's also sort of a trading range that's been evident between about 1140 and 1190 as well. So that sort of area is where we would look to buy the share. But what interests me as well is the seasonal aspect to it. Redefine pays a dividend towards the end of November each year. And if you go back in history and you look at prior years, you'll notice there is generally a bit of an underpin, and we have noticed the share price generally moving up during November ahead of that dividend. And the company will declare, it's due to declare a dividend the 5th of November, whatever that day is. I think that's Wednesday or Thursday this week. And we'll get an idea then. And then typically your last date to trade for that dividend is later in November. We're expecting it to be around about the 20th of November. So historically what we've seen is that the share price does tend to move higher into that dividend at this time of the year. So if we go back, and we'll just look at a couple of previous years, and I mean, this pattern is evident in more years than what I've got examples here, but I just want to make the point. So this is going back to 2014, last year. And you can see, have a look at the trading action from the beginning of November there up until when the dividend was paid. You can see the dividend, the ex-dividend date is when the share price moves down, it gaps down like that, because obviously that's when the share has now paid the dividend, and it's typical to see a price of a share drop once the dividend has been paid out. But notice how the share price did gradually move higher during that time. And if we go back previously, 2013, a similar thing was evident. Sorry, what am I doing here? There we go. 2013, again, you've got, the share price didn't move as aggressively higher that time, but it was in a bit of a falling trend at that stage, which was a bit different. But nevertheless, over the 2 weeks leading up to the dividend, you did see the share price moving up a bit during that time. And then again, we got the dividend that paid out, it gapped down, and so on. In 2012, before that, the pattern was once again evident. We saw from the beginning of November up until the ex-dividend date, the share price did move higher, and then it gapped down once the dividend was paid. So there seems to be a fairly consistent element of strength that comes into the Redefine share price ahead of this November dividend. So if I couple that together with the technical outlook that I've described, I think that it does tend to say to us there's likely to be a strong underpin to this share price. And it is quite possible, if history is likely to repeat itself, that we could see this price gradually moving higher in towards the ex-dividend date in November.
The thing is, Garth, for you to take advantage of this, you would presumably want to sell it before it gaps down, because then it might be to naught, even though you presumably would get the dividend if you do hold on until it gaps down. Yes,
the idea here would actually be to try and take advantage of any upward move in the price leading up to that dividend. Okay. And the likelihood is that, yes, we will probably sell it out before the ex-dividend date. Okay. So it gives us a window here of about 2.5 to 3 weeks, effectively, to hold this trade. And hopefully by that stage, we've made our money, and then we can take the profits and move on. In my experience with this, generally, once it's paid the dividend, the share price tends to fall, and then it seems to carry on falling for another week or so after that before it finds its footing again. Yeah. So my strategy here would be to try and take advantage of any strength in the share price leading up to the ex-dividend date and sell it before it goes ex-dividend.
Okay, so you've got another chart there. We'll going back to the charts then. Have you actually entered the trade?
Yeah, this is the current price of Redefine, again, the chart that we looked at a moment ago. So what I've done is I've gone long at 11 Rand 65 here. Stop loss, I'm going to look at 11 Rand 40 as a stop loss. And I'm going to look at it because it's there and thereabouts. A lot of people say to me, stop loss specific, blah, blah, blah. I think sometimes you need to be a little bit flexible on your stop losses, but remain disciplined at the same time. And that's generally how I trade these things. So around about 11.40, if it starts to break convincingly down underneath 11 Rand 40, I will exit the trade. But if it doesn't, I think the possibility is we could see a bit of strength leading up to the dividend, and I'll look to bank profits at around about 11.90 or 12 Rand, that sort of area. So, certainly not a shoot the lights out kind of trade here. This is very much just a case of hitting singles.
I was going to say exactly that, Garth. You've got me thinking on the cricket analogy, the ones and twos. I mean, this is pretty much the game you're playing at the moment.
At the moment, it is. You'll see when we unpack the details of this trade, I'm only going to risk 1% of our capital on it, and unfortunately, the risk to reward ratio here is actually not that great. It's a 1-to-1 risk to reward ratio, which is really not fantastic in terms of the types of risk to reward ratios that we normally like to look for on this show. But if I can say, I think the risk element is kind of not that high, as it were. Normally you look for a risk to reward ratio of 1 to 3, ideally, or even better than that. But then I've got to say to myself, well, what is the probability of the stop loss being triggered here? I think it's a fairly low probability because of the underpin from the dividend and the technical setup and the seasonal factors and all of that type of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and do the trade anyway, but look, certainly this is not going to move the needle much in terms of our portfolio either way, whether it becomes a winner or a loser.
Yeah, well, at least it keeps you employed, Garth. So take us through the mechanics of the trade in greater detail.
All right, so I've gone long at 11 Rand 65. The stop loss is 11 Rand 40. That means that my risk per share is 25 cents per share. I'm going to risk only 1% of our capital here. So we've got 361,000 Rand in our account, and therefore 1% of that is 3,610 Rand. If I take that capital risk of 3,610, I divide it by the risk per share of 25 cents, that gives me 14,440 shares. So to keep it nice and tidy, I've rounded it up this time to 15,000 CFDs.
Okay.
My target is 11.90 Rand. My risk to reward ratio, like I said, is 1-to-1. So certainly not a shoot the lights out kind of trade. And the exposure here is just shy of 175,000 Rand that we're taking to Redefine.
Okay. I certainly went keeping you employed when you have a look at when you face the boss in the mirror in the morning, you can say, yeah, I've done this for the portfolio, so keeping myself busy. Garth, just another point though on trading CFDs with regards to dividends. It's always somewhat of a surprise to people, I think, to understand that you actually do get dividends when you trade CFDs, because you normally just sort of associate dividends with maybe vanilla instruments.
Yeah, I think what one needs to be aware of is you get the cash flow benefit of a dividend if you're holding a CFD. Long or short, if you're short, you pay away the dividend. If you're long a CFD, you receive the dividend. But it's referred to as a cash adjustment. It's not a dividend in the strict definition of a dividend. And the difference comes in that if you hold vanilla equities and you receive a dividend, you typically pay dividend withholding tax on that. Whereas a CFD, those dividends actually will form part of your trading profits. So it's taxed differently. So there are differences there. It's not a dividend in the true sense of the definition. It's more what we refer to as a cash adjustment. But suffice to say, you do participate in a dividend if you're holding a CFD.
Okay. Garth, so what does the portfolio look like then at the moment?
Just one moment before we get to that quickly.
Oh.
We've got the top 40. I just want to update where we are with our option structure. That's a chart of the top 40 index at the moment, and I've spoken recently about this 49,100 area, which is the top that we saw in April and again now in October. That's our option structure that we've got running out to December. Now, the reason I bring it up now is obviously we were looking for possible downside participation here if the market went below 46,000. Now, that is looking increasingly unlikely at this stage. What is concerning me is we do have a little bit of risk up here if the market goes above 50,000, because we're short of some call options at 50,000. So I'm going to need to monitor that very, very carefully in the weeks ahead, because if the market really does start pushing higher into the end of the year, that could come into play, and I'm going to need to do some fancy footwork around that. And just also to keep in mind, the SAB Miller deal that's on the table adds about 2,000 to 2,500 points to the index. So, were it not for that deal, I think we would be looking quite good with our 46,000 strike puts here. Yeah. But as things have worked out, the market's trading a lot higher than that level now. So it's I'm just putting it out there to say this is where we stand, and we're just going to need to be careful. If the market races ahead, this option structure might start to cause us a few worries if it gets up to 50,000.
I mean, just to comment on that, does the market give you any indication that it may well race ahead, given sort of the trading action at the moment? Yeah,
look, seasonally, the end of the year period is generally quite a bullish time. Although November, historically, we've noticed there's often a little bit of a pullback and a bit of a correction from a seasonal point of view, and then some strength into December. So ideally, what I would want to see is a pullback now in November, and then I would actually possibly look to buy some top 40 CFDs against this structure in order to hedge that upside risk.
Okay. Garth, so then looking at the portfolio, not too much change from last week?
No, very similar to last week. We're up 44% for the year to date. Those are the trades which are relevant at the moment. We've got our Zeder where we took profits. BHP Billiton was last week's trade. We took profits there. And we've now got this redefined position open from this week.
And very quickly, your next courses?
Yeah, so last courses of the year in Cape Town and Johannesburg, I'm running high probability trading courses in both destinations. This weekend, the 7th of November, I'm in Cape Town, and on the 14th of November, I'm in Johannesburg running a high probability course, and my colleague Andrew Todd is running a top 40 futures trading course on the 7th of November. That's this Saturday. So anyone that would like details on either of these courses, please email me, garth@traderscorner.co.za, and I'll send you all the details.
Okay. Thanks, Garth. We'll leave it there. Garth McKenzie is founder and editor of Traders Corner.
Traders Corner is brought to you by IG.